the Geekiverse show, everybody. I'm Jeff Pavlak. I got Pete here with me today, and we've come together to talk about the Shannara Chronicles. New show debuting on MTV tonight, actually. So as you're watching this, the show has already debuted last week with the first 2 episodes. Pete and I are huge fans of the source material. Pete's been reading the books for years. I just started a few years ago. Huge fans of them, and we cannot wait for this show to start. Pete, jumping right into it, what has you most excited about the very first visual adaptation, moving pictures of the Shannara series?
If you watch the trailer, the visuals are spectacular.
Beautiful.
Well beyond what we normally see on a television, on small screen.
Absolutely.
Stuff. This is big budget stuff, and that's kind of exciting to me. Is that TV is starting to find more money for this kind of stuff, so you don't have to wait, years between things. We're gonna see it's a 10 episode run,
yeah.
And it, for the most part, it seems like that they're focusing only on the second book of the Sword of Shannara trilogy,
The Elfstones of Shannara.
Elfstones of Shannara, and the visuals really hit home on the idea that this is a world after our world, that it takes place on Earth. I want to say decades, but centuries in the future.
Yep, after apocalyptic wars wiped out the planet.
There's an incredible visual of the, I think it's the Space Needle. Probably.
Yep.
It's a Space
Needle from Seattle.
I wasn't sure whether it's Space Needle or the CN CN Tower out of Toronto.
I believe it's the Space Needle.
I think it's the Space Needle from Seattle, fallen down and rusted. The visual is
overgrown, moss and foliage.
Absolutely spectacular, spectacular visuals. So that's what the thing that I'm most excited about.
I think they made the perfect call by taking a standalone book and doing this standalone series. This isn't going to be, who knows how many seasons where there's just cliffhanger after cliffhanger. It's a contained story inside these 10 episodes where we're going to get the conclusion and, the beginning, everything in just one season, one sitting, basically.
I saw one interview. Probably my feeble old man brain escapes me.
Grumpy geek.
But John Favreau? Yeah, is that how you say it?
I say Favreau, hey.
The guy who's the executive producer, who's done some really big things. He's EP'd both the Avenger movies, all the Iron Man movies. He stars in Entourage. His most prominent thing is that he played Foggy Nelson in the worst adaptation of Daredevil that there ever was with Ben Affleck.
Before Netflix, revived that series and gave it some.
He did an interview, and I'm pretty sure that he said, we're producing a 10-hour movie.
Yeah,
is what we're doing of this book, which is sort of what like Lord of the Rings. That was probably pretty close to 10 hours by the time everything was said and done.
Uncut, absolutely. Return of the King is 5 hours alone.
Right. That's long stuff. But we're getting it in 1 hour. 1 hour increments.
And that's so true to the source material because Elfstones is a standalone book. It's not a trilogy. It's 550 pages of one big adventure.
Right.
And that's perfect.
And the whole Sword of Shannara trilogy is
the original.
It's 3 standalone books.
Yep.
So it's called a trilogy and stuff like that, but it's not.
No.
It's absolutely 3 standalone books. So this is exciting. I think the cast is. I'm excited to see what they can do with it. The story, just very briefly for those of you who don't know about it, involves essentially three young, maybe just older than teenagers or still teenagers that go on kind of an epic quest together. And that's what this story's about, is that quest to kind of save the humanity of their day.
Yep.
They've cast Will Olmsford. The 3 big stars, the 3 teenagers, are all relative unknowns.
Right.
Austin Butler plays Will Olmsford. Poppy Drayton plays Amber Elsidale, and
how do you say that, by the way? Elisadil? I've always said Elisadil.
Yeah, I think that's a good pronunciation of it. And Ivana Bucaro, a Spanish-born actress, 21 years old, plays Eritrea. And those are all 3 relatively unknown properties.
But they're bolstered then by some veteran actors. Manu Bennett will be Al-Anon, which I just want to talk about him real quick first.
Yeah, absolutely.
When I watched the trailer for the first time and I saw him initially, I was like, how is this Al-Anon? He doesn't have a robe. He doesn't have long hair. He doesn't really have a thick beard. But then the more I thought about it, Al-Anon is not just a Gandalf ripoff. He's not a traditional wizard. He really is a druid. He's a big, burly guy.
Well, one of the things that I found most interesting about watching the trailer was the costume design as a whole.
Right.
Is very, very modern takes on clothing today.
I would agree with that.
There's sewn on pockets and things like that are very they're part of our current clothing,
which makes sense given that it's in the future. It's
right.
not
exactly
a story of the past.
When you look at some of this costuming, it's not your traditional Lord of the Rings
right.
Kind of stuff. So again, another part of the visual aspect of this that I was very very caught by. Right. The hairstyles and everything. Al-Anon is a druid, which is this world's wizard, and he's got shaved hair on the back, as opposed to the long hair that we're accustomed to with our Dumbledores and Gandalf.
Right.
So I'm interested in that. The other person that I'm really interested to see is a veteran of this kind of movies.
I know exactly where you're going.
John Rhys Davies is
right.
joining the cast to play Eventide Elistadil. Who is the king at that time in this world, and excited about that.
I still don't know if I like him as Eventide. I mean, maybe this is just narrow-minded me, but when I think of an elf, I think of a very fair-looking person, and John Rhys Davies is a little bit haggard. But at the same time, maybe that does work for him because in this story, Eventide is very worn, very tired. He's the one who went through
right.
the original war with the Warlock Lord in the opening book. He's tired and old now, so maybe John Rhys Davies is really going to knock this out in the park.
Well, and the last thing that I want to say about this that's interesting to me is this is coming from MTV, and MTV. I grew up with the original MTV.
Yeah,
it's very much a part of my formative years. Came out in 1981. I graduated from high school in 1982. This was the stuff that we turned on when we were having a party at the fraternity house or whatever. MTV was on in the background and stuff like that. And then they moved to really awesome production stuff like, 16 and Pregnant and The Real World and True Life and stuff, like...
They've got Teen Wolf, come on.
Junk. Like, I still listen to the one of my favorite things is I have satellite radio, mm-hmm. and I listen to the 80s on 8 because it has the original MTV VJs.
Yes.
Mark Goodman, Nina Hunter, Martha Quinn, who I still have a massive crush on, and Alan Hunter, and that was to me MTV, and MTV really lost its way for years. So it's interesting to me that's the venue for this particular thing.
Right. I mean, for me, the last thing I want to touch on that's interesting is that John Rhys Davies, who we touched on before, has now played a dwarf in The Lord of the Rings, and now he's an elf. Talk about ironic after all that you saw between Gimli and Legolas, right?
There's probably some true fans who are squirming at that whole,
I think Orlando Bloom might be sending him a text or two after this show premieres.
It might be. So we'll be back after we watch we're going to watch the 2-episode premiere tonight, and then we'll be back to offer, the second half of this show, we'll be back to offer our opinions on actually how they did.
And we'll be talking a lot more because once these episodes debut, we're going to have plenty to discuss and let our minds flow.
Yeah.
Can't wait. Welcome back, everyone. It's been a couple days now, and we have seen the premiere of the Shannara Chronicles. I know Pete and I watched it the night it came out, stayed up late to catch both episodes. He rewatched it again.
Definitely fanboy.
That's right. He is more than experienced now.
I pulled out my greatest Josiah D. Leroy and fanboyed it to death.
That is extremely fanboying it, just so you guys all know. All right, Pete. What's your first reaction to seeing the first 2 episodes now of the Shannara Chronicles?
I absolutely loved it. I mean, there was a few problems that I had with it,
of course,
but they were tiny.
Right.
Tiny problems. I loved it. I thought it was, my favorite thing about it was that there were some very untraditional science fantasy high fantasy elements of the whole thing.
Yes,
I mean, the
100%.
costumes were modern day
Yeah.
costumes. They were taken from the things that we wear now and moved forward.
Absolutely, and I think it's interesting that you brought that up before the show even started, because I didn't realize that right away. But as I was watching the show, then I saw it more and more. I mean, like the potential chosen, I should say, they were wearing T-shirts, basically, fitted T-shirts.
Oh, yeah.
And then at the ball, you had all of them dressed. I mean, they looked like they came from an H&M store or an Express store.
Absolutely. Eritrea, she was wearing a pair of jeans, basically.
Right.
And she had the pockets sewn on the back of her jeans. You know, so I thought that was kind of cool.
I love that.
I'm a big fan of that. You know, as a guy who's worked in theater for a lot of years, I've done a whole bunch of Shakespearean productions in my day.
Yes.
And I like the modernization of those kind of things.
I agree.
Some of the greatest productions ever, Peter Brook's production of Midsummer Night's Dream was, you know, it's just a completely different kind of thing because they're not locking themselves into that kind of period costume. And I thought that was really cool. And along with that, the architecture.
Yes.
Was very. I mean, it was spectacular.
Beautiful.
And there was a nice juxtaposition of the old, like the wrecked ship and the helicopter and stuff like that.
Right. There's a car I think they passed by at some point.
Yeah.
Will and Eritrea.
Right. Throughout that kind of stuff, there was these things. You know, Will even says at one point in time, "Aren't you curious about the ancient humans?" And she's like, "Yeah, they're dead."
It's kind of echoing the audience in a way.
Right. So I thought that was super cool.
Yeah.
That they took some risks. A friend of mine on Facebook was like, you know, I took one look at Al-Anon and I was out. And you know, quite honestly, I thought his look was great. I loved the shaved back of the head with the sort of the rune scars on the back of his head. I thought that was cool. By the way, before we continue, spoilers.
Everywhere, people,
so
everywhere.
If you haven't watched it yet, spoilers. Turn it off right now.
Or just go read the books. I mean, that's not a bad idea.
It shouldn't take you long. It's only about that thick.
Knock it out in one day. Just binge it for a while. You know, you said Al-Anon looks great, and I completely agree with that. I think Manu Bennett has knocked it out of the park with his portrayal. There's a word that Terry Brooks used regularly to describe Al-Anon in the opening Shannara trilogy, and it's stoic. And I think Manu Bennett nails that demeanor perfectly. He is distant, cold. I don't want to say miserable, but there is no levity to him whatsoever. His job is a thankless one, and he's not doing it, you know, to feel great about himself. He's doing it for the greater good of Shannara and the whole world of the Four Lands.
Well, and I think he's good at this kind of character. If you look at his resume, he's played a lot of superhero and science fantasy, and
he's Og the Defiler in the Hobbit.
Absolutely, absolutely. And he most recently, maybe not most recently, but recently, last season he was the big bad in Arrow. He played Deathstroke.
One of my favorite supervillains.
You know, and he same kind of, you know, like he's got that. He plays that kind of character real well.
Absolutely.
And, I thought he was great in this. I really did.
Me too. The other portrayal that really hit home for me was Ivana Baquero as Eritrea. When I think of Eritrea, I'm thinking of Ivana Baquero now. I think she played the character to a T.
Yeah, I thought so too. One of the things that when I've read the books, and I just reread these, I think I said that in the first segment, that I just reread all this stuff.
They're fresh in your head.
Is I almost didn't think of them as young as they are.
Yeah.
You know, I kind of thought of them as a little bit older than they are, and I really love that she's played a little bit younger.
Right.
You know,
she's sassy.
Oh yeah.
You can't outsmart her.
Absolutely.
She outsmarts you, not the other way around.
And there wasn't anybody in the thing that I didn't like. There wasn't a character that I didn't like. I thought Poppy Drayton really does a great job.
Yeah.
As Amberly. Really does a great job.
I wouldn't say I dislike it. She is definitely a lot more jovial than Amberly was in the books, though. And I think that sense of gravity with Amberly in the books was maybe a little bit better.
But don't you think that the gravity's coming?
Oh, it's definitely coming.
Right. You know what I mean? Like, we haven't reached the point yet where they're like, oh, here.
True.
You have to take this and you have to go. You know what I mean?
That's true.
We haven't reached that yet. Like,
absolutely.
So we're still at the beginning yet. So I think that there's an opportunity to watch her character change and grow.
I agree with that.
Over the course.
Sure,
of the
we do have 8 episodes left.
And Will, to me, is he's kind of a bonehead in this, and I love that.
He's a beach hunk.
Yeah, and I completely thought that.
Yeah.
Like he's the accent that he has. He wears the hat. And, so there wasn't a character that I didn't like. I liked the 2 uncles.
Oh yeah, Uncle Ander.
Yeah,
I'm so glad that they have already established that Uncle Ander and Amberly have a close relationship.
Right.
Because in the book, as you know, Ander really is a huge support for Amberly as the quest gets rolling.
Right.
So I'm glad that they've established that right away. Helping her train for the chosen trial, leading her through a simple thing, leading her through the ball so that she wouldn't have all eyes on just her.
Right.
That simple little support from Uncle Ander really goes a long way, and I'm glad that they've established that already.
And the few, I have a couple things that I'm not sure about.
Oh, don't worry, me too.
That I didn't
Let
like.
me hear it.
One of the things is that they used very modern vernacular a lot.
Yes.
Some real colloquialisms that are very popular today here. That I was like,
does it work?
Yeah, I mean when Amberly first runs into Eritrea, Eritrea asked her, you're running away from something. Who knocked you up?
Right.
And
yeah.
I'm just like, that didn't feel right.
It does.
It felt like it was forced there.
It feels out of place.
There was something that Will said too. I'm not going to remember what it is off the top of my head, but something that he said that was just like, oh, that's not shit. Or Eritrea says to him after she drugs him with the wine, you're going to have an epic headache.
Yeah, that's so MTV. I mean, MTV, you're doing a great job, but that's so MTV to do that.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is. Who's knocked up? Are we falling back to the 16 and pregnant days? MTV's at its best. 16 and pregnant.
Oh boy. One little thing, we had 2 episodes basically, 2 full hours. I think there should have been an action sequence in there. About 35 pages into the Elfstone's book, Al-Anon faces off briefly with the Dagamore inside Paranor and fights off a swarm of Furies.
Right.
But we really had about 2 episodes of just exposition and laying the groundwork for it. I think they could have maybe added some action in there.
You had a different version of that scene.
Yes, very different.
Where the Dagamore basically shows Al-Anon who's boss at this point in time.
Which he does sort of do in the books. He overpowers him in that first fight, but I would have liked to have seen a more extensive confrontation, I should say.
And the other thing that I wasn't sure I liked was the choosing of the chosen.
Running through the forest.
Yeah, I mean it was very Hunger Games-esque.
Yeah.
With the costumes that they all wore the same costumes.
The fitted T-shirts.
And right. The blindfolds and and I thought that was cool. I'm just not sure it was cool for this.
I agree with that.
I didn't like that the elves were pitted against each other in such a way that they were willing to. I've always thought of the elves as a much more sophisticated race.
Mm-hmm.
In my science fantasy dealings, they were always the ones that took the moral high ground.
Right.
So this just completely removed the moral high ground from the whole thing.
One thing I do really like that the show captured, that the books capture so well, is that in the Four Lands and the entire Shannara franchise, elves are not the pristine, perfect things that you see in so much other fantasy, like say the Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings, the elves are the upper echelon of the living creatures in there. They can't do no wrong. It's always the humans that screw things up or succumb to evil. In the Four Lands, elves are just as morally ambiguous as humans, gnomes, or dwarves to an extent. They're not perfect. They have flaws. They're going to succumb to some problems. And they're going to have, fears and conflicts that you wouldn't see in a lot of other fantasy franchises. So I'm glad that the show also captured that initially.
Well, so overall, your opinion is?
A very solid start.
Yeah. I got a couple thumbs up, too. I really enjoyed it.
Not perfect, not by a long shot, but this is a very good start.
We've got 8 episodes left. I think that MTV's doing a great thing. I was real surprised. I said that in the first segment about MTV. MTV, again, I grew up with it. Still have a huge crush on Martha Quinn. Martha, if you're catching this, you can catch me on Twitter at Pete Her. I'm looking forward to the next 8 episodes. We're going to be back.
That's right.
After about halfway through the season, Jeff and I'll sit down again, give it another report card, and then we'll wrap it up after the whole season's over. Hoping that maybe next season they get through this 10, it's really popular, and then maybe we see next season a retelling of Wish Song.
Bring on Wish Song, yes,
right. That'd be great. I don't know where they go from there. Maybe they'd step back to Sword, or they'd move forward to the Heritage trilogy, quadrilogy, whatever.
Quadrilogy.
So,
in the meantime, though, follow us on all our social media channels. Geekiverse, we're going to be talking about this a lot. So that's facebook.com/Geekiverse, on Twitter @the_Geekiverse, same with Instagram @the_Geekiverse, all our YouTube content that we're going to put out. And then your Twitter handle again, one more time, Pete?
@PeteHer.
And then I'm @JeffreyPobs. Me and Pete in particular, we're going to be talking a lot about the Shannara Chronicles and everything going forward with this TV show. So,
get back here and watch us, because we need to.
And again, start reading the books. Start reading the books, people. They're wonderful. They're even better than the show. Well, maybe not yet. We'll figure that out. Regardless, everything is good so far. Shannara is really off to a great start, and we hope you guys enjoy it just as much as we have so far.
See you next time.
We're going.